Can you believe that a glass of cow's milk, something so ordinary today, could once have been a serious problem for our ancestors? Drinking milk now seems completely normal, but thousands of years ago, many adults who drank fresh milk could end up with painful stomach cramps and severe diarrhea. That strange contradiction puzzled scientists for years, leading them to search for answers in ancient human remains, when milk became a problem. To understand why, we have to begin with a basic rule of mammalian biology. Mammals are born able to drink milk because, during infancy, it provides exactly the nutrition they need to grow quickly and stay healthy. But as young animals mature and begin eating other foods, their bodies gradually reduce the machinery needed to digest milk. In nature, drinking milk throughout an entire lifetime was never the default. And this is the surprising part. Losing the ability to digest milk after childhood was the original human condition. For tens of thousands of years, most of our ancestors became unable to properly digest milk once they reached adulthood. Even today, roughly 2/3 of adults around the world still retain this ancestral pattern. From an evolutionary perspective, adults who can comfortably drink fresh milk are actually the unusual ones. The secret lies in the small intestine, where a tiny biological tool called the enzyme lactase does the important work. During childhood, the body produces lactase to break down lactose, the main sugar found in milk. Think of lactase as a pair of molecular scissors, cutting lactose into simpler sugars that the body can absorb and use for energy. But those biological scissors were never guaranteed to stay active forever. As we grow older, the body can begin reducing its production of lactase. Once those molecular scissors disappear, lactose can no longer be properly broken down in the small intestine. Instead, the undigested sugar continues deeper into the digestive system and eventually reaches the large intestine. That is where an innocent-looking glass of milk can suddenly become the source of some very uncomfortable trouble. So what would happen if an ancient adult drank fresh milk anyway? The undigested lactose would draw water into the intestines and then reach the large intestine, where millions of bacteria would eagerly ferment it and produce gas. The result could be bloating, rumbling, painful cramps, and diarrhea. Imagine a hunter trying to look fearless in front of the entire tribe while his stomach is performing a full orchestra behind the scenes. It sounds funny, but the discomfort could be very real. Humans started stealing milk. And yet archaeologists discovered something remarkable. Humans had already begun milking animals nearly 10,000 years ago. In the Near East, early farming communities domesticated cattle, sheep, and goats and started collecting their milk for food. This was a major breakthrough. Instead of killing an animal once for meat, people could keep it alive and repeatedly harvest a valuable source of nutrition. But if most adults still struggled to digest fresh milk, what exactly were they doing with it? How can we possibly know that Stone Age people were using milk when there were no photographs, videos, or written records? The answer survives inside ancient pottery. Bowls and jars that once held food absorbed tiny traces of what they contained into the microscopic pores of the clay. When scientists chemically analyzed these vessels, they found preserved molecules of animal milk fat trapped inside them. A shattered piece of pottery could suddenly reveal what people had been eating thousands of years earlier. Even more direct evidence was found on ancient teeth. Without modern brushing, dental plaque can harden into calculus, trapping microscopic traces of food for thousands of years. Researchers studying this fossilized buildup have discovered proteins associated with the milk of cattle, goats, and sheep. In a sense, ancient teeth became tiny fossilized menus, preserving evidence that people really were consuming dairy products. And that is where the milk paradox appears. Proteins preserved on ancient teeth show that people were consuming dairy, yet DNA recovered from ancient skeletons shows that many of them did not have the genetic mutations that allow adults to keep digesting lactose efficiently. For roughly 4,000 years, humans continued using dairy even though most of them had not yet evolved the inherited ability to handle fresh milk the way many people can today. Both pieces of evidence were true at the same time. Ancient people were using milk, but most still could not drink fresh milk easily. So why did our ancestors keep using something that could leave them in pain instead of simply giving it up? You might be wondering why our ancestors would willingly risk painful stomach trouble just to consume dairy. The answer is simple. Milk was incredibly valuable. It provided calories, protein, fat, and calcium, especially when crops failed and other foods became scarce. In dry regions where dependable drinking water could be difficult to find, milk also provided an important source of fluid and nutrition. For ancient people, milk was not always just another food. Sometimes, it could help keep them alive. The trick that changed everything. But our ancestors did not simply drink fresh milk and suffer the consequences every time. Their solution to the milk paradox came from one of humanity's most useful ancient technologies, fermentation. People discovered that when fresh milk was transformed into other foods instead of consumed directly, their stomachs often handled it much better. That discovery helped launch a dairy revolution that still shapes the way we eat today. One of the most effective solutions was turning fresh milk into hard cheese. During cheesemaking, much of the lactose remains in the liquid whey, which is separated from the solid curds and can be used for other purposes, including feeding animals. Friendly bacteria then consume more of the lactose that remains. The result is a dairy food containing far less lactose than fresh milk, making it much easier for many lactose-intolerant adults to tolerate. Our ancestors also learned to make yogurt and a wide variety of other fermented dairy foods and drinks. Fermentation could extend the useful life of fresh milk while reducing the amount of lactose it contained. That meant even adults who struggled to digest fresh milk could still obtain valuable fat, calories, and other nutrients from dairy more comfortably. A biological limitation was being partly overcome not by evolution, but by food processing skills. To see just how powerful that strategy can be, travel to the vast Mongolian steppe, where nomadic herders have lived among their animals for generations. Mongolian pastoralists are famous for using the milk of many different animals, including horses, camels, reindeer, cattle, sheep, goats, and yaks. During the warmer summer months, milk and dairy foods can make up an enormous share of their diet. Hearing that, you might assume they must possess unusually strong genetic adaptations for digesting fresh milk. But here is the remarkable part. Roughly 95% of Mongolians today do not carry the lactase persistence variants common in many European populations. Yet dairy has remained an important part of Mongolian life for thousands of years. The Mongolian steppe therefore offers a striking example of how humans can build a dairy-rich culture without widespread genetic adaptation for digesting large amounts of fresh milk as adults. Over generations, Mongolian herders became masters at working with microbes. They developed an extraordinary range of fermented dairy foods, from extremely hard-dried cheeses that could withstand harsh conditions to yogurt and lightly effervescent fermented mare's milk. Fermentation traditions could be carefully maintained and passed through families across generations. They did not need to change the animal producing the milk. Instead, they transformed what happened to the milk after it left the animal. But cheese and yogurt may not be the whole story. Part of the Mongolian relationship with dairy may also involve the microbial communities living inside the human gut. Researchers studying Mongolian pastoralists have found distinctive gut microbiomes associated with their traditional diets. Some of these microbes may help process lactose and other components of dairy in ways that make fermented milk foods easier to tolerate. When human genes do not solve the entire problem, the microscopic ecosystem inside the body can become part of the solution. Some humans changed forever. That raises an even bigger question. If fermentation and gut microbes already made dairy manageable, why did some human populations evolve the ability to digest fresh milk throughout adulthood? Around 7,500 years ago, lactase persistence variants began appearing and spreading in populations associated with Europe. These genetic changes acted like a biological switch that kept lactase production active after childhood. People carrying them could continue breaking down lactose and drinking fresh milk long after they had grown up. And this is where the story becomes much larger than food. Lactase persistence eventually became one of the clearest examples of strong recent natural selection in human evolution. Instead of remaining rare, the trait spread dramatically through some populations over just a few thousand years. Its selective advantage was powerful enough to leave a major mark on the genetic makeup of many Europeans today. But why would the simple ability to drink a glass of fresh milk offer such an enormous survival advantage? The answer was not merely that milk tasted good. For years, people assumed this mutation spread simply because fresh milk was tasty, nutritious, and worth drinking. But the evolutionary story appears to have been far harsher. A major study examining data from more than 1,700 ancient individuals across Europe found that ordinary levels of dairy consumption alone could not explain the dramatic rise of lactase persistence. Instead, the genetic advantage seems to have become especially powerful when ancient communities faced two deadly pressures: famine and disease. Imagine an ancient village after months of failed harvests. Grain stores are nearly empty, preserved foods are disappearing, and even supplies of cheese and fermented milk are running out. Yet beyond the village fence, the livestock are still alive. In that desperate situation, one of the few remaining sources of nourishment might be buckets of freshly collected milk. Even adults who could not digest lactose well might have been forced to drink it, because the alternative was simply to keep starving. But this was exactly when lactose intolerance could become especially dangerous. A body already weakened by malnutrition could react badly to large amounts of fresh milk that it could not properly digest, leading to severe diarrhea and dehydration. Under normal conditions, that would already be miserable. For someone close to starvation, however, losing even more water and strength could turn a potential source of emergency nutrition into a serious threat. Famine was not the only danger. As humans began living together in larger, more crowded settlements, infectious diseases also found new opportunities to spread. People and livestock living close together could contribute to contaminated environments and unsafe water, while intestinal illnesses capable of causing diarrhea and dehydration moved through communities. Permanent villages made cooperation easier, but they also created conditions in which disease could spread far more effectively. Under those circumstances, fresh milk could become especially risky for a lactose-intolerant person already suffering from an intestinal infection. If the digestive system was already compromised, drinking lactose-rich milk could make diarrhea and dehydration even worse. For someone who was already sick and physically weakened, the ability to digest fresh milk could potentially influence the chances of survival. Those who died during such crises also had fewer opportunities to grow up, have children, and pass their genes to the next generation. Milk became a survival weapon. People who carried mutations that kept lactase active into adulthood, however, had a major advantage. They could drink fresh milk for extra fluid and calories without suffering the same problems caused by undigested lactose. When other foods disappeared, livestock could function almost like living food reserves, continuing to produce nourishment day after day. It was during the worst periods of scarcity that the ability to drink fresh milk may have become a genuine survival advantage. Repeated across many generations, that difference could place enormous pressure on natural selection. During periods of famine and disease, people who could not digest fresh milk may have faced greater risks, while those with lactase persistence had access to an additional source of nutrition. Survivors were more likely to have children and pass the beneficial genetic variant forward. Generation after generation, a mutation that had once been rare could gradually become widespread. What makes the story even more remarkable is that this evolution did not happen only once. While European populations developed their own genetic variants associated with lactase persistence, different mutations producing similar effects also appeared independently in parts of East Africa and the Middle East. Populations separated by great distances did not need the same exact mutation to solve the same biological challenge. This is a classic example of convergent evolution. Different genetic paths arriving at the same ability to digest milk in adulthood. In that sense, the ability to drink fresh milk as an adult is a biological inheritance shaped by some of the hardest chapters in human history. People who can easily digest milk today may carry genetic variants that once gave their ancestors an important survival advantage. Our DNA still preserves traces of periods when humans struggled against hunger, disease, and scarcity. Behind an ordinary glass of milk lies a surprisingly deep story of survival. And that is how a liquid that once caused digestive trouble for many adults became such a familiar part of life today. Humans did not solve the problem in only one way. We learned to ferment milk, transform it into cheese and yogurt, work with the microbial world, and, in some populations, even change genetically over generations. The story of milk shows just how powerfully culture, microbes, and evolution can interact. The next time you look at a glass of milk, you may see more than a drink. You may see the result of thousands of years of humans adapting to the world around them.